If you work for the Catholic Church and want to avoid burnout, overcome parish dysfunctions, and put more souls in the pews, we're here to help. I'm Ty Hua, here with my co-host John Cons, and this is the Catholic Ministry Professionals Podcast, your favorite leadership development podcast for Catholic churches. Each week, you can expect engaging discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. Today's the second episode of a three-part series that will help you grow in your ability to lead in your parish. How are you, John?
Oh, I am good. It is a good day. I went outside and it was cold. It was in the 40s today. And that truly is like I think between 40 degrees and 60 degrees is where I thrive. It was so good. Like, man, it's almost sweater season here for us. So it's just a tiding of good things to come. I love it because sweater season, like if it's cold enough that I have to put on a sweater, it means it's not so warm that I'm just going to sweat because I'm moving and awake. And so I'm ready for it.
Yeah, that makes one of us.
You don't like even a little bit cooler temperature?
No, because that is the telltale sign that winter's coming.
Well,
And
yeah,
in
but you
winter, I can't golf.
Oh, it's all tied to that. I forget
Yeah.
that. That is the source from which comes your happiness and your joy. I forget that.
Yep.
Well, you just got to put like a simulator in your house. Golf all year long.
Yeah, my boss says no.
Well, I'll have my boss talk to her. Maybe they can get their heads together.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So today, our second part on our series on leadership and how to become a better leader in your parish. And of course, I want to give you a little roadmap of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And so this is a three-part series. Last week, we talked about establishing like the first thing, like if you want to lead your parish, you need to first be led. And of course, that means going to prayer. We want to make sure that we are progressing in virtue. We want to make sure that we are being led by the Lord before we try to lead others to Him. And so that rhythm of prayer is really important. And we talked about some practical tips for that. If you didn't listen to last week's episode 77, I want to encourage you to do that quick before you listen to this one. Today, we're talking about a rhythm of discernment. That's the next part. Like if you are praying, like it's good, but eventually that prayer, like if you are called, then you have to decide to go. And so you need to discern and make a decision and progress in trust in the Lord and where He's leading you. The fact that He has called you to this, and so He is calling you to go on His behalf. And so we have to respond in trust. So we're going to talk about today kind of creating a rhythm of discernment, some really practical steps and habits you can build into your day to help you to move and progress in discernment. And then finally, next week, it will be our third episode. We'll talk about a rhythm of personal growth, right? So you have to first be led. Then when you're called, you have to decide to go. That's this week. And next week, then we're going to talk about how you go there on purpose, right? What's that next step? What's that rhythm of growth? And so, yes, today we're talking about the discernment. And so just a couple scriptures I'm going to bring to mind, a couple stories from the Gospels, because of course, all of this, right? All of this is dependent on knowing the Lord. It's all dependent on coming to Him, discerning His voice and His will. And then what do we do with that? Well, we have to decide to go. And we see this again and again and again in Scripture where this is modeled for us. And a couple of just key stories, a couple of classic stories, kind of our go-tos. One of them is Peter stepping out of the boat. And I just want to emphasize this point that so much of discipleship is predicated on just being willing to go before you having been trained to go, right? You're just being sent. So in the story where Peter steps out of the boat, one of those things that should stand out to us is that Peter is called to step out of the boat. He's never been trained how to walk on water. He just has to do it. And so there's this pre-deployment that happens, this period where he says, okay, I will go. And he steps out of the boat and his faith is rewarded. And it is rewarded until he takes his eyes off of the Lord. And that's when he begins to sink. And this is that rhythm of prayer and discernment that, yes, if we're called to go, we step out, but then we need to make sure we're not looking at ourselves or looking at the stuff going on around us. We have to be looking at the Lord and keeping our eyes fixed on Him. And as long as we do that, so long as we do that, we can continue to walk on water. We can continue to trust. Another example, one that's really been in my prayer related to the ministry here that Catholic Ministry Professionals does, is Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. And I'm just struck at how in Philip's discernment, In his prayer, he hears the Lord tell him, like, hey, I want you to go here. At no point is he told what he's going to do when he gets there. He just knows the destination. And so that's kind of our discernment here. We don't always know how things are going to pan out, but if we know where the Lord is calling us to go, if we've really been praying with it, we kind of have these desires percolating in our hearts, like this is somewhere that God may be calling us to go. And so we have to be faithful to that call, and we have to go. And when we get there, we will find out the next step, right? We have that next opportunity to step out in trust, to respond to where God is calling us. But the more we do this, we have this rhythm of prayer, discernment, and action. The more we do that, the more we learn to recognize the Lord's voice with clarity, with confidence, so that we can act on it and respond in trust, knowing that when we get there, even if we take a wrong turn or even if we don't get something quite right, that He's still able to write straight with those crooked lines, and that so much of it is dependent on that motivation, that internal motivation to simply do what the Lord calls us to do. And so those are a couple scriptures that I think really kind of frame this discussion, help us to see how this plays out in the life of the Christian, of the disciple, how we are praying, how we are meeting with the Lord, and from there then stems our discernment and our decision to act. And so let's look at this really practically. What can this look like in the Catholic ministry professionals' work, their daily life? We're going to look at how you can discern daily, right? Your daily discernment, and then even monthly and on a larger scale, which I would say needs to be at least yearly, that larger scale. And so this daily part we've already talked about. That's your daily habit of prayer. And in the last episode, I encouraged you to create some kind of way of tracking just your impressions that you receive in prayer, those resolutions maybe that come out of your prayer. That's your daily discernment. That's the stuff that daily you're just going to the well and you're saying, Lord, what are you calling me to do today? And the reason this is important is because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. You only have today to respond to the Lord. So there needs to be that daily moment of meeting with the Lord, hearing his voice, and then acting on it, like asking for direction and acting on it so that we can do his will today. So that one we kind of dealt with last week. This week we're going to look at two more. And so as you're tracking these, then over time, I want you to schedule two more meetings into your day, into the rhythm, to help you have a rhythm of discernment, intentional discernment. And so making it really practical monthly, I want you to pick out a friend in ministry or a group of friends in ministry that you can trust to give you solid spiritual practical advice, and try to meet with them monthly. Now, it could be on Zoom or Google Meet. It could be in person. It kind of depends on who you can isolate, not isolate, who you can identify and get get to commit to meeting with you. So it's going to be helpful if they already like you, or you at least have something in common, like ministry, and just kind of the way you guys think about it. The reason this is going to be so good to do this monthly is because as you've been discerning for a while, you're going to have these impressions, these resolutions written down, and it may feel like you've got a lot of different things, or it may feel like, oh, all of these are centering around one thing. What you want to be able to do is meet with some people who understand the practical side of ministry, like they're living in that world, they understand it, but they also understand the spiritual side. They understand how discernment works. This rhythm, right? Ignatian discernment. This rhythm of awareness, understanding, and action. I'm aware of some desires that I believe God has placed in my heart, understanding that God or the devil could be talking to me, right? There's these two voices, and one of them is kind of trying to sow the seeds for this desire. So now I want to come to understanding of which voice is speaking, and then be able to act upon that. If it's the devil, I need to reject it. If it's God, then I want to accept it and I want to act on it. So some people who really understand the deeper reality of that spiritual discernment, because so many times we can get stuck in like we can be so close to the problem that we don't see the solution. We be so close to the discernment that we don't see what's really obvious. And those people who understand those things, both the practical side of ministry and the deeper side of spirituality, those people can kind of take a step back from kind of a 10,000 foot view and say, something's off here. Have you considered this? Right? Something's off here. Have you considered this? And they can really practically approach it and kind of call out too. You're giving them permission to call out. The other value is they might also have things they're discerning, so it creates that dynamic together. So you want to do that. I would say do it monthly, because you want to make really certain again that as you continue to move forward, if there's a moment where you need to check something or pivot, especially regards to your discernment, you want to do that sooner rather than later. And the more obvious, the better. And then I would say then that's the first meeting is monthly to do that. And then finally, the last one is at least yearly to sit down with your pastor to schedule a meeting to discuss the things that you do feel called to. This is gonna, this is gonna be a really important meeting. And your pastor is probably not going to take the initiative on sitting down to do it, but you want to make sure you've got this as a rhythmic thing so that as things are developing and progressing in your spiritual life, as you are feeling called and as you're developing your ministry, you can share that with your pastor. So take the initiative, say, hey, I would like to schedule a yearly meeting. Maybe at the beginning of summer would be a good time. Like the year has ended, everybody kind of takes a deep breath and you say, hey, Father, I've been praying, I've been discerning, I feel God is calling me to do this. Can we sit down and talk about it so that we can maybe um, any of the things that may be issues along the way, or talk about some of the things that I'd like to maybe transition as we go forward into the next year. And it builds in that conversation and then some buffer before the next year starts where you can plan and implement some new things if you feel called to do them. Practically speaking, I think most pastors will take the meeting but have very little opinion on the stuff that you bring them, as long as you're not trying to heap more work onto their plate. And I would say that's one caveat. But either way, at a minimum, as you're discerning and as you're seeking to implement the vision that God has given you for your work and your ministry in the parish, having this meeting makes sure that your vision isn't in conflict with your pastor's vision in the parish. And that's important because there is a real spiritual hierarchy within the church, and we need to honor that. We need to be aware of that. And so now I think over time, ideally, this will lead to deeper conversations about the vision, the mission of the church, how you're making disciples, how your vision is helping to implement the pastor's vision, even inspiring him to think about those things and how this all lines and connects. But if nothing else, at the very least, you know that you are not actively in conflict with what the pastor is doing in the parish. And so I think if those two main meetings beyond your daily rhythm of discernment, adding in a monthly one with some ministry friends, and then at least a yearly, maybe a quarterly or every 6 months, sitting down with your pastor, scheduling a meeting so you can pass those things on. And then finally, like if you need something else, you can find someone to specifically be a spiritual director for you. That could be your pastor. Not all pastors have that gift, so I don't want to just fall back on your pastor should be your spiritual director, because they don't all have that gift. So find a spiritual director, and this could really play in well, particularly for your personal discernment. So I think with these three conversations, you can really begin to flesh out just a clearer idea of what God is calling you to, the direction that you need to go to say yes, so that you can take action.
Yeah, those meetings are important because they're I don't want to call them resets, but they're refocusing you to, hey, here's what we talked about last year. Here's what we've been doing. Is it on par with what we're trying to do? And if it's not, how do we correct course? If it is, like, good job, let's keep going. This is a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing. One of the things that we talk about in every introduction to each episode is to avoid team dysfunctions or excuse me, avoid burnout, overcome team dysfunctions. Well, if we're not communicating on a regular basis, we're going to get burnt out. If we don't communicate on a regular basis, we are going to get sick of each other. Like, man, what is John doing? Why can't I get him to move in the same direction as me? But if we're communicating, I can ask you, "Hey, John, in previous conversations, we've talked about this is our goal. Is that the same direction we're going? Because I feel like we're kind of wandering. Let's refocus." And then all of a sudden, it's like, "Yeah, you're right. I have been off," or it's like, "No, actually, I think what you've been doing has been straying from the mission, right?" I think you have to do it on a regular basis. You look at every Fortune 500 company, they don't just wake up and say, "Yeah, we're just gonna keep doing what we've been doing for the last 15 years." They've got regular meetings. They've got almost like the State of the Union address by the CEO or their leader, but they're always meeting to make sure that what they said they were doing, they're actually doing. So again, the model of that. again, I don't want it to become a secular deal, but they do a lot of good things. And we need to take the good and leave the bad. One of the good things that they do is regular communication, meeting on what they hope to do, and hopefully correct if need be. If not, hey, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to take it then, that's really practical, right? Is this practical reality? If we're saying things out loud, we're telling people where we're going and why, or where we believe God is calling us. That's really practical in the sense of trying to stay on the same page, trying to execute on the work, on the mission of Jesus Christ, on a spiritual sense too, right? Even to take it a little bit deeper, is the devil plays in the dark, right? The devil plays in the dark. So the more we can bring these things to the light, the less power he has to sow discontent, to sow frustration, to sow destruction or dysfunction. So bringing these things to the light so the devil can't play with them is a really powerful way to make sure that we are living. I mean, how many times do we have the parish meeting, and then we have the meeting after the meeting where we talk about all the things in the parish meeting or the team meeting that we didn't like or don't line up or are frustrating or whatever? If instead we can have these rhythms in which we are sharing these things, we can really clear out a lot of exactly what you were saying, Ty, which is those parish dysfunctions, the burnout that comes with dealing with the same headaches over and over again. So again, having these meetings, it helps to bring all this stuff to the light. It also, if you're a person who has trouble communicating these desires, it gives you time. It gives you time and a little bit of a buffer and a little bit of practice getting a few reps in communicating what that desire is, communicating what that vision is that you think God is handing to you. And so we all have to kind of have these moments, and we all need these rhythms, these habits in place so that we can be more effective ministers. And so, the other thing I would encourage you to do, is that if you're having this yearly meeting with your pastor, I would also encourage you to go to our parish or our website. I want you to download our planner sheet, because one of the things that you can do is, if you're trying to meet with your pastor and share with him the thing that you think God is calling you to do, you can go to catholicministryprofessionals.com/resources. And there we have a planner sheet where you can actually walk through, like, hey, this is the goal or this is the vision. Here are the important conversations that I need to have. Here are the specific things, like in the work, these tasks that I need to get done. And then even here are some more of the things that I need to learn in order to be ready for this. What that does is it allows you to come to that meeting prepared, having thought through some of this stuff. So you have something very specific you're bringing to that discernment meeting with your pastor to say, hey, this is where I want to go. These are the things I want to do. And also to ease his mind that I'm not asking you to change everything about the way you do things, pastor, but this is what I want to do in my ministry. So if you're somebody who needs help kind of like organizing your thoughts, that can be an excellent resource. So again, catholicministryprofessionals.com/resources, and download our planner sheet. And it becomes not just a way for you to kind of put your ideas on paper, make them more concrete, but a way that you can kind of use them to pitch to your friends in ministry at those meetings, to pitch to your pastor, to say, hey, this is where I'd like to go, and this is what I need to do to get there. And I think with that, we can move on to the devil's advocate. Dun dun.
John, I'm just not going to move until God tells me to. I don't. If He's not going to open up the heavens and let me hear that sweet voice of His, I just don't want to make the wrong move.
Yeah, I understand that. Actually, I think that's something we all intrinsically understand on a very deep level in our lives, in all kinds of ways. Is I want to make sure this is the thing God wants me to do. The problem with that is that if you knew with 100% certainty and clarity, it wouldn't be faith. Like, faith necessitates, for something to be an authentic, faithful action, there needs to be some element of, I trust you, Lord. I'm going to do my best, Lord. I trust you to be there with me. Right. So we need to move. Right. I think there's a speaker who said, I can't remember what it is, but who it was, but he said, since discernment became popular, nobody's made any decisions. There is a reality that in order for discernment to happen, you need to take action on that discernment. right? You can't discern forever. Eventually you need to move. If you're somebody who wants to be married, you can't just sit there and go, Lord, I think I want to be married and never do anything. You gotta go out to some events and meet people, right? You might have to sign up online for online dating, whatever it might be. You got to do that. If God is calling you, you got to move. And the things that happen, the thing that's true about this is that if you have a desire in your heart, God puts those desires in our hearts, right? That is his invitation to act. And so God doesn't do the thing for you unless you choose to participate in that action with him, to say yes to that invitation and to move. And then also there's the reality that action brings clarity. So many times when you make a decision, it brings clarity. So my wife will do this thing when we're going out to eat where I'll say, "Hey, where do you want to eat tonight?" And she might say, "Well, I don't know. Give me 3 options." Right? Okay, well, we can go, Four Brothers for burgers, we can go to, Blue Tequila for Mexican food, or we can stay home. She's like, "Well, I'm gonna eliminate 2 of those. I know I don't want 2 of those." So, when I bring those options before her, then there's clarity there. There's another story of a monk who was discerning between 2 different orders, and he just couldn't make up his mind. He was just like, "Lord, just tell me which one you wanna go to." Like, he did all of his research, he did all the homework. At the end of the day, he's like, I like them both, but I don't want to make the wrong choice. So he said, I'm going to flip a coin. Heads, it's option A. Tails, it's option B. And he flipped the coin. Tails, option B. And his heart fell, and he was disappointed. And in that moment, in that decision, he received clarity. He goes, no, this is where I want to be. So again, not wanting to disappoint the Lord came back to this is where I want to be, recognizing that the desire that was in his heart was placed there by the Lord. And so, again, if God is placing these desires in your heart to transform your parish, to do something new so that you can make more disciples, so that you can do your work better, so that you can build the kingdom, you can move his mission for your parish forward, those are good desires. All you need to do is discern how to implement them, right? You need to trust, pass those by some trusted people, and then ultimately share it with your pastor and then decide to go. So again, this whole idea of I won't move until God tells me to. Well, so many times him placing that desire in your heart is that invitation to begin moving. And so, yes, make a discernment, but make an actionable discernment. All right. Make an actionable discernment. Don't just sit back. Take action on your discernment. Make your discernment something that you can take action on.
Well, one of the things too, why we don't take action is because we want confidence in the fact that this is what God wants us to do. Well, John, I think you had some Latin in your theology days at Briarcliff. Shout out to Briarcliff. Um, what's the root word of confidence? Do you know that, or where we get the word confidence?
I no, I don't.
So it's
School me.
confide, with faith. Make the decision, right? Obviously, discern, make the decision, and with faith, go do that thing, because God will tell you eventually, if by the fruits of whatever you do, if that's what He's blessing it, or He isn't blessing it. If He doesn't bless it and it's going nowhere, okay, keep discerning, keep praying, keep being with the Lord in prayer, and He will speak to you. But if we don't do anything, if we don't go with confidence or with faith, and we don't have that confidence, well, it'd be no different than, I think there's a parable out there called the parable of talents, where you just sit on what the Lord gives you. You're gonna be sternly rebuked. Like, why didn't you do anything? So that's what I would say. I know you're looking for the confidence to make that decision and take action, but understand what confidence is. It's just having that faith, right? Going with confidence, or with faith, excuse me, to do the thing. So just do the thing.
That'll preach.
Mm.
All right. We never want to leave you without something that you can take action on starting today. And so, what I want you to do is, first of all, if you don't have a habit, like a bulletproof habit of prayer that you are consistently on, I want you to schedule that habit of prayer into your day. Go back to last week's episode, re listen to it, and just pick out the time, the place, and how you're going to pray and commit to it. The next thing is for this week's episode is I want you to schedule those 2 basic meetings that we just talked about. A monthly meeting, reach out, send an email to 345 ministry friends, people that you trust, in their spirituality and in their work and say, hey, can we meet regularly? Create your own little mastermind, your own group where you're going to hold each other accountable to intentional discernment to build the kingdom in your ministries. So I want you to reach out to them, send those 3, 4, 5 emails today, and then schedule that monthly regular meeting. And then finally, reach out to your pastor and say, hey, can we put a yearly meeting on the calendar? I want it to be at this time, and this is what I would like to talk about. I think if you do those two things, it's going to kind of set this time clock in your life where you're going to be a little more intentional about a little more intentional about discerning what the Lord is calling you to do, and then working that into action. All right. So thank you for listening to the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast. We really want to see the culture of our country being led by the Catholic Church in our lifetimes. And we know that will happen if we can bring a better culture of work to the church. So if you've been in Catholic ministry for a few years and you feel like your ministry efforts are being frustrated, I want you to send an email to catholicminpros@gmail.com because we'd love to talk with you about how a parish event or a training can help you to transform your parish through your work. And finally, don't forget to text this episode to a priest or a friend in ministry that can benefit from it.
And with that, we'll see you in the vineyard.